Well, Leah, thank goodness this is a podcast, so our listeners cannot see just how much I have aged this week. How are you holding up? And most importantly, what did you stress eat on election night?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I, like many Americans, had to quit wheat recently due to chronic migraines. Ooh. And I may or may not have eaten pizza on election night, which was fairly illegal in my 10-day wheat fast. But honestly, it was fine. I didn't get a migraine, even with all this stress. So I feel like, whatever, eat wheat, live life. Sounds good.
Totally. Eat wheat, live life. I think that's a great motto, Leah. I found myself just like shoving my face with enchiladas and also drinking whiskey. That was the solution.
Yeah. Well, we're recording this now on Friday morning, which you may recall was the morning when Biden and Harris pulled in front in Georgia and Pennsylvania. It was a pretty amazing feeling when that happened. And we know votes are still trickling in. Every vote is being counted. But it's pretty clear at this point that Joe Biden is going to be president and Kamala Harris is going to be vice president.
It is extremely exciting. And largely thanks to the incredible organizing efforts of Black women in Georgia, which is my home state, we are looking at 2 runoff races that could decide the balance of power in the Senate. So there's a lot of work that is still ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy week. You know, my department voted to give me tenure this week, literally on election day. So I had 4 hours of pure joy, and then the Florida return started coming in. So that was a dark 5 hours. And then we started to see things happen in Arizona. It has just been up and down and sideways, and the Senate races, and it's been a long week.
Leave it to political science professors either to be totally on the nose or utterly oblivious. Unclear with that one. I was extremely excited that in my sort of rage tweets on election night, AOC followed me on Twitter. That was my personal balm and salve.
What? I can't even believe that happened. That is the coolest thing. And I don't know what you did to make it happen, but that is the coolest thing.
Me either.
So we know all our listeners are still processing this. And, you know, there's been a lot of sadness in terms of what happened with the Senate and all our hopes for big climate legislation in 2021. But we are calling this episode the Silver Linings Playbook. And we're doing that because, you know, we can't forget the big picture here, which is that we won the presidency. You know, that is going to allow us to do so many big things on climate change and also just stop the bleeding that has been happening under Trump. So we wanted to kick this off with some silver linings. What are some things that we saw in this election that were actually pretty good news for the climate? First, Joe Biden ran on the boldest climate platform in history, and that was a winning strategy.
It was, and the Biden-Harris ticket won more votes than any other in American history.
Exit polls showed that climate change was a top issue for voters. It's clear. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have a climate mandate.
And every woman in the squad got reelected, including climate badass AOC, and the squad got bigger.
Lots of local climate champions were elected, whether that was in state legislatures or city councils all across the country. We've got folks like Chloe Maximum in Maine and Nikhil Saval in Pennsylvania.
Voters voted for clean energy when it was on the ballot. Columbus, Ohio voted to be powered by 100% clean energy by 2023. Not 2035, not 2030, 3 years from now.
And in Nevada, voters approved a constitutional amendment. The state will be targeting 50% clean energy by 2030.
Fox News reported that 7 out of 10 American voters want more government spending on green and renewable energy, and even more than that, are worried about climate change.
And fossil fuel companies, they poured loads of cash into key elections, local races, ballot initiatives, and they lost.
Louisiana voters rejected a constitutional amendment that would have given huge tax breaks to oil companies.
And all across this country, activists are winning fights to stop fossil fuel infrastructure. On Election Day, we stopped a big oil development in Santa Barbara, and right afterwards, an LNG port in Texas got stopped.
Come January, we will get to start rolling back the Trump administration's heaps of anti-environment rule changes.
And that means that the Trump administration will be over. They will not be able to screw our planet and our health anymore.
It's actually a lot of good news. I think we should dig into what this moment means, Leah.
Let's do it. This is a matter of degrees. I'm Dr. Leah Stokes.
And I'm Dr. Katharine Wilkinson, and together, we're telling stories for the climate curious. In this post-election episode, we'll take up the meaning of the 2020 election results.
What is the path forward on climate action, and what are some of the bright spots that we should be sure not to overlook? There's still a lot of good news when it comes to climate action. And so Katharine and I wanted to start out with some of the bright spots that have just happened. We were joined by two heavy hitters this week, Heather McTeer Toney and Sam Ricketts.
We honestly couldn't ask for two better people to help us understand the state of climate politics in the wake of the election. Heather is the senior director at Moms Clean Air Force. She's a former regional administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency. And she was the first African-American, first woman, and youngest person ever elected mayor of Greenville, Mississippi. She knows the ins and outs of what a Biden administration could do to pursue a just climate agenda. Heather's also a triathlete, a cornbread perfectionist, and she has an awesome essay in All We Can Save, which is called Collards Are Just as Good as Kale.
I've got to make a little bit more space in my garden for some collards. And maybe if I do that, I'll call that the Heather patch. Those are Heather's collars over there.
I love it.
And you might remember Sam Ricketts from our episode on clean energy. He is a senior fellow for energy and environment at the Center for American Progress, and he was climate director for Washington Governor Jay Inslee's presidential campaign. He co-founded Evergreen, an organization at the forefront of developing detailed progressive climate policies. And when he's not on his best behavior, as he will be on our show today, he's one of the few people I know who can outswear me and talk even faster than I can.
And we started our conversation with that all-important question. What did you stress eat on election night? Sam, let's start with you.
I think I went through a bunch of potato chips this week. That's because that was the thing that I found. It was salty and it was savory. And once I started eating them, I didn't really stop.
It's an American classic. I love it.
Election week.
Heather, what did you stress eat on election night?
Oh, I thought you were going to say stress drink.
Well, also an acceptable answer.
So election night, seriously, I went to my local Kroger. I got 3 pounds of snow crab legs. My parents are originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and I was so fiending, just Old Bay seasoning, the spirit of my grandmother and my mother. And I sat there and went through, I know, at least 2 pounds by myself. Along with the new 19 Crimes bottle of wine from Snoop Dogg. That was my go-to for election night.
I love this. This also feels like sort of good ritual vibe in addition to good food
yes.
stress outlet.
I felt it.
It's like bringing in the good omens here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
While in the midst of my prayer time. I mean, I had all of it going on at the same time. I was operating in a spirit of faith, food, and family.
That's good. I love it.
Genius.
Well, obviously, the election went really great in some ways, and, there's some things we're maybe not as happy about. And so we want to start today's conversations with executive action. That feels like it's kind of the top of a lot of people's mind right now on climate, and I know this is something that you both know a lot about. So we want to talk about what are the laws that we have on the books that can help us make progress on climate change, not in 2025, but in 2021. So Heather, I know you worked at the EPA. So tell us, what do you think we can start doing when, hopefully, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are running the executive branch?
Well, I think the first thing on everybody's mind is what happened on November 4th, which was the United States officially coming out of the Paris Climate Accord. And, it's been top of mind for the enviros for quite some time because we knew that this was a process that was started under the Trump administration, but it wouldn't quite be official until the day after the election. Just that's how time worked in terms of the number of days needed to officially pull out. And to see the United States take that official action on the day after an unsettled election was unsettling, to say the least. I think on day one, minute one, we'll see a Biden administration recommit themselves to that agreement and begin the process to realign the United States in a position of leadership, not just coming back for status quo of where we were, but really working to position us to be a leader in climate action and taking approaches and steps to coordinate with other world leaders of just what the new benchmark should be and how we can get to that quickly. So I'm anticipating and really looking forward to us immediately saying, hey, we're all in. Our mayors, our governors have always been all in. This is what our community wants, and this is our priority.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I feel like the Paris Agreement has been such a stain, really, that's been playing out under the Trump administration. And it'll be so reassuring to have that fixed on really day one by the Biden administration. Sam, what about you? What's top of mind for you on the executive action?
Top of mind for me is what a historic week this is. I mean, just in the first instance, it's worth pausing, reflecting on the fact that, what just occurred, first of all, and what ended up being a very resounding victory for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris. More Americans cast the vote for that ticket than have ever cast a vote for a presidential ticket in any history before. You've got the first woman elected vice president. You've got first woman of color elected to the White House. You've got the defeat of Donald Trump and the intentional ignorance and scientific denial and inhumanity that he's been operating under in the White House for the last 4 years, which includes a rejection of his, the 125 environmental rollbacks he's been effectuating over the course of the last 4 years. That's crucial. The other just part of what I think is historic is that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris ran and won with a mandate to act on climate. This was a central part of their agenda. They campaigned on the Build Back Better plan that was the most comprehensive and ambitious climate platform ever put forward. They used climate as a closing message in their victory. They ran climate ads in swing states like Arizona and Michigan that they're going to be winning. Votes are still being counted in a couple places, but they're going to win. That's historic, and they're going to get a chance to take office with that mandate. I think Heather's totally right. In first things first, we need to rejoin the global community. This is a global effort to confront this crisis, and getting back into the Paris Climate Agreement is something that President-elect Biden has already mentioned doing on Twitter in the last couple of days, even before the race is called. From there, I think we always knew that beginning in 2021, with a new presidency, as soon as we can get Donald Trump out of that White House, this is going to necessitate an entire a whole of government approach to build this clean energy future, to really get ahead of this crisis. I think about things in sort of three different buckets right now. Number one, utilizing every tool you've got across your agencies. That is regulations, that is use of the Clean Air Act to drive down emissions from power plants, tailpipe standards and fuel economy standards to go after transitioning your vehicle fleets. That's use of NEPA to build better climate evaluation and also equity into your environmental review processes. That's use of financial regulation to squeeze carbon and fossil fuel investment out of the economy. That's every tool in the toolbox, and every agency is a climate agency now. And you can do a lot. You can do a whole hell of a lot with that. Number two,
Sam,
yeah, please.
Sam, just quickly for our listeners who won't know what NEPA is, could you just break that down real quick?
This is the second time in 2 days that that's a really good point. Thank you. NEPA being the National Environmental Policy Act, sort of the landmark law that governs how infrastructure projects are permitted throughout the country. One of the first major environmental laws passed in the federal government in 1970.
It should be a household name, and maybe it will become a household name in 2021.
With this podcast, a little luck, it will be. the second bucket is just around mobilizing investments. The federal government, first of all, spends $500 billion a year in procurement and investments itself. And it also has a suite of finance authorities that you can get dollars on the street and continuing to build the clean energy economy. Two, you've got to work with Congress, and Congress has got to work with the White House in reinvesting in economic recovery. We still have millions out of work. We're still in the middle of this economic crisis because of the pandemic and the Trump White House's utter failure to deal with it. So that's going to necessitate action from the legislative and executive branches next year. And that has an opportunity for climate investment. And then finally, and Heather touched on this, a partnership with state and local actors who over the last 4 years in particular, but even over the last decade, have really become drivers in their own right of building this clean energy economy, and a very intentional partnership at getting down to the local community level with all government actors driving this thing down with a place-based strategy is, I think, a really exciting opportunity that states and locals who have been driving this ball forward, who have said we are still in the Paris Climate Agreement, who have continued to make progress, are finally going to have a great partner now in the federal administration. And that's a partnership that can drive a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I totally agree with your approach there, Sam. I think these standards under existing law, that's something we can do. And I know Heather has actually worked at the EPA. So Heather, what's your thinking in terms of what the EPA specifically can be doing under a Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I think, we've got a lot of work to do both inside and outside of EPA. As Sam alluded to, that's not the only agency that should be focused on talking about climate action. We really have to look at, and I think the Biden administration is doing this, what is the holistic approach? How are we really intertwining climate conversation activity, creating it as a foundation throughout all of our agencies, and EPA certainly is a linchpin there. But there's a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, the agency over the past 4 years has been decimated through the loss of the integrity of science in the way that this past administration has not valued the science, the institutional knowledge of the people in that agency. I can tell you from working in the Southeast region of EPA, those are some of the most brilliant men and women that I have ever met, and have been so dedicated to working on climate issues, bar none. To see their work and their science be completely torn apart and discounted by this administration is hurtful. And, I think one of the things we've got to do is get in there and show, hey, we understand and value not only expertise, but that this has been years, and that we know climate is not an overnight issue. It's not something that we just say, okay, we can flip a switch and we have corrected the problem. No, this has been years of scientific research, study, and we have to continue to support that. So all of that being said, I think, even building upon what Sam just outlined in terms of the three buckets, for agencies and for us outside of agencies, this will be a combination of us working together as a team, supporting EPA, supporting the science, the integrity of the organization, but the integrity and intersections of climate with every single agency within the federal government. I don't think we should put all the onus onto just one agency.
I couldn't agree more. And this actually takes us really perfectly, Heather, to the second thing we wanted to ask you all about. As Elizabeth Warren loves to say, personnel is policy. And we will not ask you to name names, but we would love to hear what kinds of people you would love to see getting appointments in this administration, whether that's running the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, all of these key agencies, Heather, that you're referencing that touch some piece of the climate puzzle. And how do you think Biden's approach on appointments might be different? And maybe we should just pivot right back to you, Heather, since you're kind of on a roll.
Well, I know we're not using certain words. I'm going to try my best, Leah, to behave like you and Sam are doing right now. But in where I come from, there's a value to PhDs and BAs and everything, but there's also called this GSD, and it's a get you fill in the blank done degree. And
You can have a PhD and a GSD.
And
you
a
can have both of
GSD.
them.
Hey, you can have both of them. And I think that this administration, I certainly believe that Joe Biden's got that GSD. And I think that Senator Harris had that GSD. And I think that the folks they're going to be looking for people that have those degrees. And, it just means, hey, we need people who can get stuff done, that can get the actions and can not only look very effectively and efficiently at what we need to have done quickly to repair, but also to put us in a position that's moving us forward. So I fully expect that the administration is looking for folks that, they have a track record of getting things done, that can build bridges and can mend fences and can work in a bipartisan way, because that's going to be critically important, and that understand the value of both long-term and short-term planning. So I think this is going to be paramount in the decisions that they make, and, having great team players that can work across all of these agencies.
I love this. We'll be looking for people who roll up their sleeves and GSD. and I think, as you're saying, Heather, working together, right? More committed to making change than being in charge would be such a refreshing shift in this administration. Sam, I'm curious, what would be kind of on your top list of superpowers you'd like to see in this in the appointments?
Well, let me just second and greatly appreciate Heather's good point that the most important credential that anyone's going to have is this GSD degree. I think it's a really succinct way of saying it. I think people who are willing to roll their sleeves up and get the job done, people who are willing to work across agencies, the folks that I love working with, and especially in this climate space, are those who combine sort of the ambition and the creativity about what really has to happen if we're going to decarbonize by mid-century, with the sort of the know-how that makes that ambition reality. And I sort of seek those people out, and I find them, I try to keep them close, because I think there's just a world of wisdom in being able to operate in both lanes, both the how-to and also we've always got to press harder, we've always got to go further, break down the silos, think more creatively than people have done so in the past. I'll just further also add that I think the Biden-Harris transition team is looking at a whole suite of really great folks. Another key credential is people who've operated in deploying these policies and these solutions. People like, former regional EPA administrators, people like state and local officials across the country who have actively been building the clean energy economy on the ground in communities, even while Trump and science denial prevailed in Washington, D.C., is another key thing to keep in mind. And I think and hope that they are.
I think that we should expect this administration to look like the American public, to look like our country. We should expect to see people that come from diverse backgrounds, from diverse regions, but also that are not put in stereotypical spaces, right? There are Black and brown people who do finance and banking. There are Indigenous people who talk about air, and there are people of so many varied backgrounds that I think this administration is going to do a really good job of showcasing America's talent, but also our diversity and our ability to work seamlessly together across both sides of the aisle. So I'm really looking forward to seeing just the fabric of our country reflected in the administration.
Heather, you just took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say the exact same thing. I'm really excited to see more diversity in the Biden-Harris administration. And I want to give a shout out to Amy Barnes, who is a native Hawaiian who has been doing a lot of work actually to try to come up with lists of women who can serve in these roles. Because definitely in the space that I work in, energy and electricity, so often you can just find yourself surrounded by literally just white men talking about these issues. And I think it's so important to have diversity, both on racial lines and gender lines, income, regional lines. We have to have the full suite of people working on these things. And I deeply believe that that is going to be the Biden-Harris approach, which is super exciting. And so now we're going to turn to maybe the less fabulous topic, or maybe really exciting, which is legislation, this thing called Congress. We've got to be realistic a little bit here. We're doing the Silver Linings Playbook, but we don't know what's going to happen in the Senate, and it's not looking super good. So right now, for those of you who are paying attention, there are still 3 Senate races that are too close to call. 2 in Georgia that are going to go to a runoff in the new year, and 1 in Alaska that we're probably not going to hear about until this week when this show is actually airing. So we need 2 more seats for the Democrats to gain control of the chamber. And let's say we don't get that. Let's say we're dealing with a world where Mitch McConnell is still in charge. Sam, I know you have thought a lot about this. What can we do?
We began a conversation talking about all the things that can get done right off the bat, for which you need Congress minimally. Having the presidency back in the hands of light rather than darkness is really, really crucial. It's the first step. So let's celebrate that. 2, you're very right that having Mitch McConnell control the United States Senate is a clear and certain barrier to progress on the things we care about in confronting this climate crisis and building a more just and equitable clean energy future. There's still an opportunity to ensure Mitch McConnell is not in control of the United States Senate. Number 1, there's still count and balance in Alaska, which is worth keeping an eye on. Number 2, there'll be 2 runoffs elections on January 5th in Georgia. Katharine, I know you're from Georgia.
And Sam, January 5th is my birthday.
And January 5th is your birthday.
What I would really like are 2 Democratic senators.
Wow. So everyone here, everyone listening to this, we're all planning to have a huge birthday party for Katharine in Georgia on January 5th. I have a sister that lives in Atlanta. I'm announcing here. I haven't talked about this yet, but I'm visiting her on January 5th. So that, seriously, we should all get engaged in this race. The reward is so great in having control of the United States Senate in Democratic hands, and the risk is very low. Well, just stay safe rather in pandemic terms. But we've all got to get engaged in this race. And if you can't make it there, send resources. If you can't send resources, make phone calls or just get engaged. This is a crucial election that we've got to turn out for. And there's an opportunity to win 2 seats, for crying out loud, on Katharine's birthday. So with that said, we've got to move legislation. There are things that have to be legislated. There will be clear and present opportunities to move the ball forward. Naturally, it will need to be of a more bipartisan hue if the chambers are split between parties. Number 1, we've got to rescue this economy. Trump and McConnell to date have refused to do so, to advance investments that are sorely needed to keep working people in their homes, to reinvest in the healthcare system amid this pandemic, to ensure people are able to claim unemployment benefits, to provide relief to states whose budgets are hurting so badly because of losses of revenues, and to reinvest in building the economy build back better the economy for a sustained economic recovery. Into that legislative discussion, we must insert climate solutions, clean energy investments, sustainable infrastructure investments in pollution-free communities, et cetera. Number 2, there is the opportunity to advance perhaps infrastructure legislation, which is traditionally enjoyed bipartisan support. There's the need to reauthorize transportation programs, the need to reauthorize water resources development programs that could present an opportunity to advance the ball on solutions. And of course, there's appropriations. There's the need to fund the federal government every year and the need to reinvest in programs that can continue to support clean energy innovation and deployment, can continue to support environmental justice. There are tools to advance here. And the last part I'll say is, for the Republican senators listening to this is their opportunity to show that they care more about their constituents and economic recovery and the climate and their constituents' health than they care about fealty to Mitch McConnell. So that's Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. That's Rob Portman in Ohio, right? That's Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania. That's all 50 Republican senators. This is your chance to, Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Lucy Murkowski. You can name them all. This is their chance to show that they care about solutions, not just obstruction. Because I fear Mitch McConnell's take will be exactly what it was in 2009, when he was more interested in harming the Obama presidency than he was in getting anything done. Let's see who follows him this time.
So I'm going to echo and cheerlead on with Sam here to say, shout out to my Spelman sister, my SGA president, Stacey Abrams. I'm a proud Spelman alum. Stacey was my SGA president when I was a freshman at Spelman College, and she is just as big of a star today as she was when she was walking around Spelman College campus. So my dollars have already been sent to Georgia, and they have more of my dollars coming. And I'm like you, Sam, it is pack up. The Spelman Women Lead Coalition have been in force to support everything that our sister is doing. And Katharine, I hope for your birthday, we're able to stand there in our blue and white and say, yes, we have made it happen, because we know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, that the woman to do the job is on the ground. That's my Georgia push. Yes, we're going to make it happen. I think that we've got to keep in mind priorities and time frames. Sam's right. There's a lot we can do within the first 2 years. Let's not forget 2022 it's right around the corner, folks. There's some more Senate races that are coming up. And this is about accountability. This is why I love Mom's Clean Air Force, because these are fierce women who are armed with the facts and are unafraid to go on the Hill as well as in their own district and talk to their members of Congress, talk to their senators, and demand action now. That type of engagement is going to be critical moving forward. So I know for a fact that there are going to be moms that, after this election is called at the beginning of January, they're going to be in those Senate offices and they're going to be asking, why are we not passing legislation? What is happening? And Sam's right, bringing it back to the local level. And then the last thing I'd say is we know there's going to be, or there should be, some type of COVID response that takes place. There's got to be some legislation that talks about economic recovery and coronavirus and how our country needs to heal and repair. And guess what? Climate action is a part of that. Jobs, sustainability, infrastructure, resiliency, building in communities is a part of the economic response to COVID. So, there are a ton of ways that we can make sure to interject climate repair conversation, foundational elements of legislation that should be passing through, and at the same time keeping pressure from those grassroots organizations that have been so important thus far while getting the job done. I think it's a holistic 360 all hands on deck approach. I'm looking at, even if this is a Senate makeup that has Mitch McConnell still in the leadership position, there are still opportunities to put the pressure on from the people and the constituents. And that's what's got to happen.
I love that is where you took us, Heather. And you mentioned moms on Capitol Hill asking the hard questions. Because as we looked at in our second episode, a big part of the reason that we've gotten to this point is activism. It's organizing. It's keeping the pressure on. And as we look towards a Biden administration, with or without a Democratic majority in the Senate, I want to talk a little bit about what we need from the climate movement. And Heather, you've shared a little bit, but I'm curious if there's anything you want to add about just the way that you would like to see the movement showing up to continue this forward momentum that's been really incredibly built up over the last 2 years.
So I think the climate movement over the past year has come to the realization that racial equity and environmental injustices cannot be separated from the conversation. And that's important because the unfortunate events of 2020, coronavirus, but also the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, the I Can't Breathe movement took on a whole nother image of just really the Black and brown community's inability to physically breathe from air pollution, from having the police brutality, from coronavirus. And the environmental movement, I think, woke up. And mainstream environmentalism said, okay, if we don't recognize, engage, and bring everybody to the conversation, number one, we're running out of time because the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, they're not giving us more time to reduce carbon emissions. It's lessening. So let me just throw a couple of things out here for your audience to try to bring this home. This year in 2020, we have seen coronavirus, we've seen racial unrest, we have seen police brutality, but we have also seen more storms than we have seen in years. I mean, this year we are now up to 28, going on 29 named storms. Hurricane Ada, I think, is where we are. We are now in the Greek alphabet, folks. I mean, seriously, I'm an AKA, and I'm thinking we're gonna have a hurricane named Alpha Kappa Alpha at this point because we are that far into the Greek alphabet. But we're in the Greek alphabet in terms of named storms, and some parts of our country have been hit repeatedly. The Lake Charles, Louisiana area, the Houston area, the Gulf of Mexico. That industry has been completely decimated this year alone. And then there are wildfires out west. And then, we had a derecho in the Midwest. All of these things that are happening at the same time within the environmental movement, we have woken up and taken note that everybody's being affected. And we finally have an opportunity to come together, put away some of the issues we've had in the past. And don't get me wrong, there have certainly been problems between environmental justice groups and mainstream environmental groups in terms of really building trust and identifying what is the key issue. But this year has definitely put us on a place and a playing field where we're saying we know working together works. And we have seen that raising these issues in Black and Brown communities has brought climate voters out. And we're learning how to talk about it in ways that are cohesive and are creating culturally competent solutions. I love it. And I hope that it continues and that people continue to make space at the table for everyone.
Yeah. Sam, what's your take, especially, knowing that part of the reason we are where we are with the Biden-Harris climate plan is because the pressure was sustained, right? There's been kind of a learning curve and a raising the bar on goals. So how would you like to see the movement continue to push the administration, push our legislators? What would you hope for?
First of all, I just want to associate myself with the things that Heather was saying. I think the climate movement, those who are fighting for a livable planet, for a healthy present, for a better and more just economy, there's a congealing across a number of different factors that have come to play, and a movement that's circled around standards, investment, and justice now that's built around fundamentally fighting for climate and jobs and environmental and economic justice together. And that congealing of this movement is incredibly powerful, and it's relatively recent, but I think it's there and it's here for the long run, and people staying in solidarity with that is top of mind. My thing, just stay engaged. The movement's just got to stay engaged in the legislative fights, in the electoral fights that are to come up in January 5th in Georgia. Just as a reminder, in what your officials are doing. I mean, the thing that we've come to understand is climate affects everything. Pollution affects everything. It's affecting our health. It's affecting our economy. There's a chance to build a better future, and that's going to require action at all levels of government. There's been this incredible movement for the Green New Deal, for greater environmental justice. Like, there's been such activism that's come on the scene, especially in the last couple of years. And it is, Katharine, to your point, utterly transformed where we are now. It's just got to sustain itself. I know the leaders of these movements are planning for that. I have been planning for that, no matter who gets elected and when they get elected. But that's the ball game, is staying engaged at every level of government. Know who your representative is, know who your senator is, know who your state representative is, know who your state senator is, know who your city council person is. And when you see them on the street or in that town hall meeting you're going to, ask them what the heck they're doing on climate. Ask them what they're doing with concentrations of cumulative impacts of pollution in disadvantaged communities. Ask them what they're doing to fight for good union jobs, building this clean energy economy. Just keep pushing.
Yeah. And I'm personally super excited about the role that the administration can play, the kinds of folks that we talked about, maybe being appointees, to help move this newly expansive, amplified climate narrative forward, right? This is the story about justice and jobs and a livable future. And the climate movement has taken such a damn long time to get to that compelling public narrative. And I'm just really excited to see that spread and grow in 2021 and beyond, just helping to bring people in, welcome them in, and have the biggest, strongest team possible.
And it's great, Katharine, to see the people who are coming to this space and in this work who have been environmentalists and didn't know it. Like, I love seeing that. I love seeing young people, old people, church mothers who didn't realize that the work that they've been doing to protect their local church from being overrun by a landfill down the street, they're realizing, oh, that's environmental work. That's correcting environmental justice. And they're realizing that some of the things they've been doing their entire lives are now in this realm and space. So the table is huge. Some people are just realizing that they're here, and I love it. And I think you're right. This is going to be expanding constantly because both Senator Harris and Vice President Biden have always been doing this. This is nothing new. They've been saying and talking about these issues, not just on the campaign, but throughout both of their careers. So I think it's important to recognize that we're reshaping and reframing even what climate and environmental work is. And that's important.
I didn't actually know that story, Heather. I think I must have heard you on an interview or read something recently where you talked about Lisa Jackson saying, Heather, you have been doing environmental justice work for a long time.
Right.
And being like, wait, what?
Right. She was standing in my city and she's like, we were standing there. I think there's a picture of it too. We were standing and she sort of like looks at me to the side. She's like, this is environmental justice work, right? I'm like, what? No. She's like, no, seriously, that's what you're doing. And she was absolutely right. I was working on issues around water quality in my community, a community that was historically not only African American and by census data impoverished, but that had not taken the necessary steps to protect infrastructure throughout the community. And that's a classic environmental injustice. And I saw it as economic development for a community, opportunities for infrastructure redevelopment. But Lisa was one of those folks who connected the dots. And it just completely changed how I saw this work. But I think not just for me, for tons of people all over this country that realize, this is not just about polar bears and people hugging trees. This is a movement that connects people to space and to nature and to our very existence here. So it is a matter of my kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 14-year-old, where and how they breathe and live and the different career paths they have. I mean, environmental work is so much broader than I think what we've said it is, but I love every moment of it. It is just fascinating and innovative. And I'm going to stop now because I can go on and on.
All right, well, we're going to do a lightning round now. So Sam and Heather, get your buzzers ready. Get on your toes here, okay? We can call this thinking on your feet. That's what my 5th grade teacher used to call it. Okay, so we're going to do MVPs, most valuable players on a bunch of different stuff, okay? So starting at the top, Sam, with you, MVP for best state in the Electoral College in 2020.
Georgia.
Heather.
I'm going to go with Michigan.
Ooh, Michigan. Good pick.
And shout out to Tommy Walker. Look it up. Detroit versus everybody. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Okay. Next one. MVP. Most important climate law in 2021. This is existing legislation. Heather, you're first.
Clean Air Act.
Oh, easy. Sam?
Clean Air Act.
Oh, I know. It is the MVP. What else is there?
Clean Air Act is sort of the linchpin of environmental legislation. Law. It not only has so much been poured into this, the attacks that have come on the Clean Air Act over this administration, and I think the ways that it's been misinterpreted, it's very crucial for us to address it moving forward, but in a way that both acknowledges the environmental injustices, the way that things like recalculating mercury and air toxic standards, recalculating the actual science goes into harming people who live in communities. I think that there's a lot of work we can do there. But also, states that have used the Clean Air Act as a way to look at how they can address pollution in their own communities and how they can address standards in their own communities. It's important. It's sort of a foundational element. It's the roux for your gumbo. It's the base.
There you
right?
go.
And we've got to make sure that we are doing everything to make sure that that is a solid base. Nobody wants gumbo with a bad roux.
So the Clean Air Act
Just runny.
is
Just
the roux. There we go.
Right. And this administration has definitely given us like a watery base box gumbo roux for a Clean Air Act. So we got to fix that.
Well, that brings us to the third question in the lightning round. MVP, most important Trump rollback we can undo quickly. Sam.
Targeting California's waiver for clean cars.
Boom, clean cars. I agree. Heather.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Since seeing how there's like 100 of them at this point, I think the attack on the mercury and air toxic standards, it's one that moms has
baby.
Moms, it has been impacts babies' brains. It amazes me that the people who are so concerned about life in utero, and don't get me wrong, I'm a mom myself. It definitely is something that concerns me. Please don't try to poison my child before my child is born. Like, this is basics. So I'm going to go with Matt's.
And in previous life, I've written actually several papers on the topic of mercury pollution, so I'm feeling you on this one, Heather. All right, MVP, person or organization who helped us secure this climate victory in 2020.
Mom's Clean Air Force, hands down, 100%. A shout out to 1.2 million moms, dads, abuelas, tias, ecomadres, all the mamas that came out. And when I tell you, listen, there's a lot of folks that I don't mind going up against. I will say I can be a little contentious at times, but one group that I'm proud to be a part of, you don't mess with somebody's mama. Like, you don't. And these women, listen, they have texted, they have called, they have put on masks, taken the kids outside, rode bikes, ran, all to get climate as a number one issue. And I'll be doggone it if they didn't do it. So shout out to Mom's Clean Air Force. Yes, I'm biased.
All right. It's fine. That's great. Moms, go moms. All right, Sam, you can do evergreen if you like.
No.
Think about your mama, Sam. Think about your mama.
That's right. I just wholeheartedly second Heather's reference to the Moms Clean Air Task Force and the phenomenal work y'all are doing. I'll also throw out another in the Sunrise Movement. It's been inspirational to watch them galvanize such energy of the youth across the country around climate solutions and really pushing folks to think bigger and more ambitiously. It's been inspiring to watch.
Okay, last question. What's your MVP for possible pro-climate Republican crossover? What can we get those guys to agree to?
Infrastructure. I think anything infrastructure. Every day is infrastructure. Every day I'm hustling. That's quite frankly the theme song. And I say this coming from, I live in a red state. I'm a Black woman who's a Democrat in Mississippi. Working across the aisle is sort of how I've had to grow up in this game. And if there's anything that I can tell you my Republican colleagues have responded well to, it has been economy, jobs, infrastructure. I will tell you a quick story of working alongside then Governor Haley Barbour when Obama was first elected, and we were working through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And if you recall, at the time, I was a mayor at the time, and mayors were really excited about getting funding on the ground for shovel-ready projects, as they were termed. And there was a huge Republican push that said, oh, this is too much money. And they were pitting us against one another. Well, I'm raised Southern, and I have good home training and good home manners, as my mother would like to say. So I immediately started talking to my governor about, listen, I know we're not going to agree on everything, but this is what I need. This is what I want. This is what I think could go well in our community. This works for both of us. People were a little surprised when the money came out, and the state of Mississippi, was number one for the state getting money. And then there was my little city of Greenville, Mississippi. Like, we got more money from ARA than the Capitol did. And folks called and they were like, how the heck did you make that happen? And it goes back to, again, knowing how to have conversation, relationships, bipartisan issues, and understanding what moves both sides. And in my experience, it's been economy. So I think that as much as we can tie infrastructure and job and COVID response to economy, we do well and make friends.
All right, Sam, close us out. MVP.
I agree. Economic recovery. We've got to do it, and we can do it the right way. So come on, Mitt Romney. Come on, Lisa Murkowski. Let's build back better together.
Amen.
Amen. Obviously, we're going to be hanging out in Georgia next month, trying to secure a Democratic control of the Senate so that we can, save the planet.
Sam's going to bring the gumbo. I'm going to bring the collard greens and cornbread.
Yes.
And we're going to have a bang-up birthday.
We're making this happen. I cannot wait.
Sam will be with his sister. Heather will be with her Spellman sisters. It is going to be epic.
I'm going to be with my climate sister, a.k.a. Katharine Wilkinson.
Guys, Leah Stokes, first time in Georgia. It could be very exciting. And in all great seriousness, dear listeners, if you do care about the runoffs in Georgia, there are two great organizations to support: Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight and the New Georgia Project. Look them up. Send them your cash.
And we'll put their links in our show notes.
Heather and Sam, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you for having us. This has been fun.
Are you guys feeling better? A little more positive about the world?
Yeah.
Everybody loves a silver lining.
Hey.
I'm fired up. Now the work begins. I'm fired up.
There you go. Right. We'll sleep sometime in the next, month or so. It's fine. It's fine. We're good.
A Matter of Degrees is co-hosted by me, Leah Stokes.
And by me, Katharine Wilkinson.
We are a production of Postscript Audio.
Jamie Kaiser, Sydney Bartone, and Stephen Lacey produced the show.
Sean Marquand edited, mixed, and composed our theme song.
Additional music came from Blue Dot Sessions.
The show art was designed by Carl Spurzum.
And our website was designed by Caroline Hadalac-Sono.
A special thanks to the funders and supporters who made this show possible: the Hewlett Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the 11th Hour Project, UC Santa Barbara, and others.
You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, or any other place you get your shows. Or go to our website, degreespod.com.
And you can follow both of us, the pod, and our production team on Twitter. You'll find our accounts on the website and in the show notes. And, your number one task this week is to figure out how you're going to help out the Senate race in Georgia. But then your number two task is, if you're liking the show, share it with your friends and family.
Definitely. And stay with us as we tell more stories for the climate curious.